and welcome to the McLean Chronicles. My name is Ross McLean, and thank you for joining me for this special international edition of the McLean Chronicles. I'm going to give you the date for today's broadcast. I don't normally do that, but we're putting this together on Thursday, September the 21st, 2023. And the reason why I'm giving you the date is because this is covering the topic of a breaking international rift that is going on between Canada and India. When I do my analysis and my podcast, you can listen to the other episodes, I make them generally as best I can so that they're evergreen, so that the analysis actually applies to something more than just the news of the day. And I try and help you make sense of what is actually going on with politics and particularly even propaganda today. And the propaganda podcast that I've done has really gone popular. I think it's important that people learn this. But what I'm going to do in this special international edition here is I was called upon by Mark Petroni, who's a great talk show host here in the Toronto GTA area for Saga 960 Radio. He called me while the story was breaking when Trudeau announces that supposedly Indian agents have murdered or assassinated a Canadian on Canadian soil on the first day of the opening of the House of Commons. And I get called a lot, I have been in the past, on breaking news stories to talk about the analysis and what it means and where something is going. And so I think you'll find it interesting in this particular interview that we're going to air that I did with Mark Petroni on the day and the almost the same hour that this story was breaking when we recorded the interview, as to what was actually going on and how to listen to these politicians when they're saying things and how the media is reporting things. They're not giving you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. They're leaving out information. They're trying to drive emotion. They're trying to stir hate. They're trying to change the channel from their own problems. I mean, one of the things that's interesting here, you'll listen at the start in the first segment of this interview, where Justin Trudeau comes out and talks about how it's important that Canadians pay attention as to what's happened here. There's been foreign interference, almost, he says, basically, in our country. And this is terrible, and our agencies need to look into this and get to the bottom of this and hold people to account. Yet he's not doing that for the Chinese foreign interference that has already been documented with receipts. They are dragging the ball, ragging the puck on that, and not doing the work. And the most, I think, pernicious thing about this whole episode is he's teaming up with his, I'm going to call him his vice president in this interview, Jagmeet Singh. They're holding the Canadian democracy hostage with their stupid supply and confidence deal. He should have been out of power a long time ago and would have been, has he not worked some kind of deal with the devil. And in this case, I think Trudeau is more the devil and Singh's made the deal with the devil, but maybe it applies just the other way around too. Trudeau's making a deal with the devil because there's allegations of closeness between Jagmeet Singh and the Khalistani terrorists that he has never denied and hasn't gone back. So you listen to this interview, and as I forecast what's going to happen, it has really exploded since that time. Since this interview, Canada quickly kicked out a diplomat from India. India kicked out a diplomat from Canada. And now India has also announced that they're going to stop visas from Canadians going to India. The defense minister, someone asked him a question, I don't know who. See, this is the wrap-up smear on propaganda, another podcast of mine you have to listen to. They asked the Minister of Defense, Bill Blair, was there any indication that the Indians sabotaged Justin Trudeau's plane when he was in India? And then he waffles on the question. This is the Minister of Defense, mind you, the man in charge of war for our country. He evades the question and doesn't say no. Don't ask such a ridiculous question. I've heard no such evidence to any assertions. He lets it hang there as the Minister of Defense. I mean, I can't imagine a more irresponsible way to deal with this international conflict. And as you'll hear in this interview, Canada does a lot of trade with India. And guess what? we're on the receiving end of the better part of the deal. We ship them agricultural products because they need them to feed their people. And they send us what? Pharmaceuticals that our population depends upon to live and survive? That's what comes from India, as well as technical products, technical expertise. And the number of Indian students over here that are studying internationally are basically supporting our post-secondary school system with the fees that are paid. I mean, this is just a ridiculous riff. So listen to this interview with Mark Petroni and make of it what you will as to where this goes in the future when you're listening to this podcast in the future.
We're back with more on News Talk Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this Tuesday edition of the Mark Petrona Show. Ross McLean joining us from the GTA, a security expert, also has a fantastic podcast that Ross is going to tell you a little bit about. We've got Ross because, of course, this announcement by Trudeau on the whole issue around India claims that somehow the government was involved in assassinating an individual in British Columbia. And he has turfed an Indian diplomat. India says the allegations are absurd. They have countered with their own diplomatic measures. And so we're in the midst of this imbroglio with the biggest democracy in the world. And I was really looking forward to getting Ross's take on it. Welcome to the show, Ross.
Yeah, this is quite the issue to talk about. I think it's escalating rapidly. And I think Canadians got to take a real hard look at this to see where this is going, Mark. This is a serious issue.
Let's listen to the Prime Minister make his statement earlier on this situation with India.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Canada is a rule of law country. The protection of our citizens and defense of our sovereignty are fundamental. Our top priorities have therefore been, one, that our law enforcement and security agencies ensure the continued safety of all Canadians, and two, that all steps be taken to hold perpetrators of this murder to account.
Yeah, well, China has been threatening Canadians for years now and meddling in our elections, but he didn't take much action on that. Had to be dragged kicking and screaming into doing anything about that, Ross. But here we are. The allegations are flatly denied by India. And I guess I don't recall a time when our relations with that country were any worse than they are right now.
They are as bad as it gets. And let me start off my preface with this. The India politics that Trudeau is quite literally, I think, just playing politics with so that he can hang on to power.
Yeah.
Literally hang on to power. There's the old saying that people have put out about him. I believe it was Sun Tzu that says the idiot, king will burn his whole country down just to rule over the ashes.
That's right.
He is putting Canada in a very precarious position. Indian politics are complicated. There's a lot of issues on both sides, and we've got the largest Indian diaspora, I think, outside of India is in Canada. I have so many Indians that I work with. We've got so many in the audience right now that are going to be listening. All good people who aren't involved in this, but let's look at this. You basically have Trudeau working with Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet Singh has been involved with and does not answer the questions about his involvement with Khalistani terrorists. He does not answer them. And he came out and put out a tweet yesterday, essentially threatening that he is going to go hold Modi to account. And he's essentially Trudeau's vice president at this time. He's the only thing keeping Trudeau in power. So why did they choose to go with this statement at this time? Now, I think it is just politics. And we talked about foreign interference a lot on here. We are seeing it rear its ugly head again here completely with what is going on here. India is a massive trading partner to Canada. We ship them agricultural products, about $4 billion a year. Guess what they ship us? Just stuff like just things like computers, pharmaceuticals, high-end things, and all that sort of stuff, as well as thousands and thousands and thousands of students come here. And so many Indians have families here. And Trudeau is putting that all at risk here to change the channel on where he's at. And I think there's some serious problems we need to have looked at here, Mark.
Do we know if this guy's even a Canadian? I mean, Trudeau called him that, but I've seen conflicting information about that. I mean, obviously, he claimed. I'm talking about the victim here of that assassination, that murder. His background, I don't want to be mean, but it is kind of a checkered past in terms of how he entered the country using a fake passport, making claims eventually for asylum, which is okay, then entering into a marriage of sorts, and working as a plumber, which is all well and good. I'll ask you a little bit about that. If you know anything about his background, whether in fact he is a Canadian citizen, he may very well be. Been here since 1997, so it's quite possible. But yeah, he did claim refugee status, but he also used a false passport to enter the country, which is a criminal act. And so, the other thing I was going to raise with you is, India is a place where there are deep and very, very strong grudges against other people of different faiths, of different political views. It's a very volatile situation. I mean, it's quite possible that this man was basically assassinated, for lack of a better word, for political reasons. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the government of India knew anything about it or had anything to do with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, these grudges exist between groups of people. It's a very tribal environment, and long-standing grudges, for lack of a better word, have existed in India for centuries. So in that kind of environment, I can see a situation where an individual like Hardeep Singh Nijjar would end up being targeted by various groups who hold grudges and oppose certain aspects of what he stood for. But again, you have to draw a link between those assassins and the official government of India. And I don't think the government or our intelligence agencies are anywhere near that. I mean, it really looks at this point like they jumped to a decision that the government is guilty before having all the goods. By his own admission, these are only allegations, Ross. They don't have proven facts. They think, and they look at these and say, yeah, it's credible, but they don't know exactly what's happening. So this is a case of taking action before you really know the situation. Does it seem that way to you?
Oh, no, absolutely. It's the first thing I saw. Like, look, I do investigations, and I look at politicians and I analyze words and how they speak. And the words that came out of his mouth were that there are credible allegations about a potential leak to a possibility of the. And I'm like, well, hold on. Why are you going ahead?
Yeah.
Why are you announcing that? Why are you leaking intelligence information when there's a lot of issues going on around the world now with Khalistani terrorists? They're having issues in every country right now. In fact, in the last few months, there's been about 6 Khalistani terrorists who have died. There was another one who was shot in Canada a little more than a month ago. There was nothing made about that one when that happened. And for Trudeau to bring that up in the way he did it, accusing a government, and as you said, this guy, you look at the history of this guy who was killed, he is no angel, apparently. He was involved in other large acts of terrorism alleged by the government. So people who he would have killed back in India or been involved with, those people would have lots of reasons to find him over here as well.
Bingo.
Not sanctioned by the government, right?
Bingo.
So to make that jump and apply that to basically accuse Modi of being involved in the murder, like he doesn't have the receipts to prove that. And as you pointed out before, he did not believe our intelligence agencies when they said he took all kinds of money from the Chinese. They influenced elections and all sorts of. He thought they were garbage then, and he wanted the leakers found out. Well, here's the leaker in chief, and my sense is he's doing this to change the channel. He's got who knows? Did Jagmeet come to him and say, you better call this out, or I'm not going to support your government for the next little bit, and you're going to have to do your election when Poilievre is at the top and you're at the bottom?
Yeah, I have no
Is this a
doubt.
conspiracy? Is this a conspiracy of fools who are playing with Canada, our country, so that they can stay in power?
Yeah.
That's what it looks like to me.
Yep.
I mean, that's what it certainly looked like to me.
What a good point you've made, because there's no doubt in my mind that this is political. I've already said that. I think this guy's looked at the possible political ramifications of what he is doing and figures that he can parse a certain segment of society and get them behind him on this issue, using longstanding divisions in India and longstanding grudges between various groups in order to try and politicize the situation here at home and maybe score some political points. To me, it smacks of desperation for this guy. And he's also, and I said this days ago, he's rebranding himself as Mr. Tough Guy. We've seen it now for the last week, as his polling numbers continue to plummet. He has gone after the grocery store chains. He's gone after the telco people. He has ripped off a Conservative Party policy. He has also stolen elements of Pierre Poilievre's speech. He has basically said, I'm Mr. Tough Guy. I'm standing up for the little guy. That to me is their whole shtick now. And I think this is part of that. There's this tweet by Rupa Subramanya, who is briefing these geniuses. He's talking about the government. This is sanctimonious in the extreme. She's talking about a statement by Melanie Joly, the foreign affairs minister, talking about the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Obviously, she says, Subramanya says, this is about diaspora politics in Canada and not about India. You're going after a rising power that is the world's largest democracy. This is scorched earth policy, which is screwing Canada, but may be in the Liberals' political interest to change the conversation. Diabolical. So she's on the same wavelength as you, Ross. But let's listen to what the foreign minister had to say.
First and foremost, I would like to extend my condolences to the family and loved ones of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. The allegations that a representative of a foreign government may have been involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen here in Canada on Canadian soil is not only troubling, but it is completely unacceptable. If proven true, this would be a grave violation of our sovereignty and of the most basic rule of how countries deal with each other.
It hasn't been proven true. I mean, by our own admission, if proven true, yeah, well, fine. If proven true, then you take strong action. You drag the diplomat into your office. You launch investigations. You raise issues with the World Court, or stand up in the UN and shake your fist at the country responsible. If it's proven true. What if it's not proven true, though? What if it turns out that, yeah, he was murdered, all right, but that had nothing to do with being ordered by the Indian government? Then they look pretty stupid. They've got egg on their face. So, and I don't think that they're sure about this. I think in their own minds, they think, well, by the time we really find out for sure, this whole thing will have long, been cleared up, and we can move on. People will forget. But in the meantime, we can talk tough and we can look tough. And, let's face it, Trudeau's reputation for buffoonery is international nature. He was ridiculed, Ross, when he went to India. He was attacked mercilessly in the media over there. He was snubbed when he asked for meetings. He was just treated almost like persona non grata because everybody knows he's a joke. So now all of a sudden he's trying to compensate. This is about compensating for the fact that he's losing big time, losing support, losing credibility. To me, this smacks of exactly the kind of thing that you were talking about. An attempt to hold on to power, to, build some kind of reputation for credibility when he has none.
And we'll be back with more on News Talk Saga 960 and The Mark Petrona Show after this.
Ross McLean joining us on Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this Tuesday edition of the show. We've been talking about the imbroglio with India now, with our government finding somebody else to blame for issues, as Ross has suggested, an attempt to change the channel, and jumping all over the biggest democracy in the world. I'm not saying that they weren't responsible. I'm not saying that they were. If they were, they should be held to account. But we don't know. This is premature in the extreme, Ross. What do you think?
Well, you just played that clip by Melanie Joly talking about expelling the Indian diplomat. I mean, I call her Trudeau's work wife, right? I mean, before his divorce with Sophie, he was all over the world with her, going places, dancing, doing things, and all that. Then his divorce came up, and oops, he sent her over to Europe for like about a 3-week trip. She's back now doing the foreign relations, and I don't think she's the sharpest pencil in the Trudeau cabinet, to say the least. But what she's engaging in there is something called the wrap-up smear, right? She comes out and says, if this was true, then it may be this and it may be that. And it's what's called a wrap-up smear. Now all the reporters get to come out and write about that. And I'll just quickly say, on my podcast, if people can find it, I'll post it on my Twitter at McLean Chronicles. I did a whole episode just on the political use of the wrap-up smear. And what we see going on these days, Mark, is much of the media, the paid media, I'm glad to be able to come on your show and your station, because you guys aren't involved in smear. You tell it the way that it's going on. And what I see happening here is this is a wrap-up smear. It's designed to cause problems for other people and take people out. I mean, they just had Russell Brand just got the wrap-up smear.
Yep.
Former sexual assaults.
Yep.
Donald Trump got the wrap-up smear. I understand this morning the hero from the movie The Sound of Freedoms, they have anonymous people coming out saying he was involved in sexual assaults. Anonymous people. Once again, the wrap-up smear. It's meant to come out and take people out. It's not doing journalism.
Yeah, well, to your point on that, Ross, just to interrupt real quick, I know you got a full head of steam here, but you talked about the wrap-up smear. Here's Nancy Pelosi, former Speaker of the House of Representatives, talking about exactly that. She's talking about what they do.
Putting down hospitals and the rest of it. So they don't want them to see that contrast, so they focus on something else. And it's a diversionary tactic. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You demonize, and then we call it the wrap-up smear. If you want to talk politics, you call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this. So they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made.
Yeah. And so there you go. There's a description by the people who are pretty much the authors of this type of attack on others. I mean, they're certainly not the only ones to do it, but they smear people with falsehoods, and you sell it to the media, you present it to them on a silver platter, and they put it out there as news, lending credibility and legitimacy to these falsehoods. Anyway, I thought I'd throw that in there. When you brought up wrap-up smear, that's what I thought of.
Well, that's the clip that I used on the podcast to explain it too. But look, listen, there are so many great Sikh people. I mean, Sikhs are proud people. They do this stuff. And I will just say that Jagmeet is not the guy who should be leading and speaking for the Indian people or the Sikhs. He is the wrong guy. He is putting things back. Like I said, today he just spoke as perhaps the real power behind the throne. He threatened the largest democracy in the world, the leader of the largest democracy in the world. He threatened him, basically, that he was going to come for him and leave no stone unturned. What the heck is he doing leading and having anything to say? That is so irresponsible, as is Trudeau's leaking it's possible, it's potential that they may have. Like, who knows how he twisted the words on that? This is wrap-up smear politics, and we're seeing it time and time and time again. And that's why I want to put the information out, and I'm glad to talk on your show about it, so people don't get fooled by this.
I
Whenever you
appreciate that.
hear
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
whenever you hear these reputation damages and it's followed by, it's been reported that, that's the wrap-up smear by
Yeah.
someone who's merchandising it.
Exactly.
I mean, there are legitimate times to say something's been reported, but not when it's a smear that has no proof behind it, Mark.
And to have this guy talk about threats against our sovereignty when he found out that China was meddling in our elections back in 2021, before the election of that year. If you and I were sitting in that chair in the top job and this thing falls on our desk, it's DEFCON 1. I've said this in the past, and at the risk of repeating myself, it's true. You don't have any luxury of doing nothing at that point. If you are defending the country that you were elected to defend, then you take action. You call news conferences. You call in the Chinese ambassador. You call the police. You talk to intelligence experts. You find out as much information as you can, and you tell the public that this is going on and to watch out for it. And what did he do? He did nothing. Zero. And the allegations made about Chinese meddling were, I suspect, more credible than what we have here, where you have these allegations made. Don't know if they're true or not. There's an investigation going on. But this guy jumped all over it in the case of India. But when it comes to Chinese meddling in our election, which is also an attack on our sovereignty, Ross, this guy did nothing. So massive double standard here in terms of how he handles Chinese attacks on our sovereignty and how he handles these allegations made about India. I think, the other thing that has dawned on me, because this guy's in the pocket of the Chinese have very little love for the Indian government. Those two, they've had a shooting war on that border. There is very little love lost. There are still border disputes. There are occasional shootings, and they have deep levels of suspicion over each other. I mean, they're like I said, they've been neighbors forever, and they don't trust each other very much at all. And now you have the Chinese, I think, may very well be planting some seeds here as well. I mean, I'm not saying that this is absolutely the case, but remember, they hate the Indian government. And if they can drag India through the mud in Canada, in the West, then I think they'll do it. China's more than happy to do it. I don't know if anybody's looked at that, at the Chinese connection to these allegations. I mean, I'm saying it's possible when you have a government that adores Chinese-style dictatorship, that is in the pockets of the Chinese, that ignored Chinese infiltration and meddling in our election. We just had that grifter environment minister go over there and basically give thumbs up to the forced labor camps that happen to be producing solar panels over there. I mean, he's an absolute disgrace, is Gilbo. To me, this kind of smells, and that's why I raised the issue. I don't know. Am I wrong in possibly saying that there might be a Chinese connection to all of this?
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. And look, when the information came out about the Chinese interference, I'm confident that there was Chinese political interference. Why? Because the documents and the receipts were leaked out by CSIS agents, which talked about wiretaps, quotes, financial receipts, copies of meetings, the money that went to the Trudeau Foundation, the money that was given to a person here in Toronto, $250,000 to affect elections here. There's receipts on that. Why someone's not in handcuffs right now, I don't really know. Well, I guess I do know, because Trudeau was the target of that interference. They built a statue to his father, for crying out loud, and put it out there. And you're right, China and India do have their trouble, and this helps change it from China. But I got to tell you, this political interference now that's going on here, this is foreign political interference when he's attacking Modi for his good friend Jagmeet to his benefit. It changes the channel. It does help the Chinese. And they're all grifters. I mean, Trudeau just held his, they just had their Canada 2020 conference where he went there, right? And that is another, in my opinion, it's another grift, the same as the We Charity and the same as the Trudeau Foundation. It's a not-for-profit that takes money from huge companies to buy and fly in people like Tony Blair and the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. And Tony Blair is the biggest grifter out of politics living right now. And he's meeting with Trudeau. He's having time and is being paid for by other companies. What are they figuring out? They're figuring out a grift. I mean, you can look up Tony Blair. I tweeted about it when he was here. When he was in government, he squashed an investigation against the Saudis. When he got out of government, he took a secret contract with the Saudis at 42,000, I think it was pounds a month, with a 2% commission on all the oil he would sell. And you know who he sold it to, Mark? He went over and met with China, and he hooked up China and Saudi Arabia so they'd sell oil back and forth. This is Mr. Progressive Grifter, Save the Planet guy, who Trudeau's meeting with and taking pictures and all proud. They're all progressives. These guys are a bunch of grifters the way they're behaving. And to do it now, to be messing with India, I think is very, very dangerous. The Khalistani terrorist network is serious. They were responsible. A lot of people are too young to know about it, remember it, for the Air India bombing that went on. That was the largest aviation terror incident up until the World Trade Center. They are involved in attacks, in assassinations of Indian diplomats. These are serious terrorists, and there's some of them on our territory in Canada. And here's Trudeau playing politics with it. That's not a leader. That's a grifter, in my opinion, Mark.
Yeah, no question about that. And let's not forget, Trudeau is facing more pressure inside his own caucus now. Open attacks by Liberals, former members of Parliament, people questioning whether or not the guy should step down. He's feeling the heat like crazy. And let's listen to this interview that was done. This was posted by Canada Proud. More Liberals are beginning to say it's time for Trudeau to resign. Here's John Manley, who was a longtime member of Parliament, talking on Bloomberg.
Well, there's a couple of factors at play here, Amber, when you look at political trends. I always have thought that, at least in modern Canadian political history, that there's kind of what I call the Seinfeld rule at play. So Seinfeld, great TV show. I loved it. Made me laugh for many years. It lasted 9 seasons. After 9 seasons, some of the actors want to do other things. The writers are running out of ideas. And most importantly, the audience starts to say, yeah, that was good, but what else is there? So 2025, Mr. Trudeau will have had 10 seasons. Before him, Stephen Harper, 9 seasons. Before him, Jean Chrétien, 10 seasons. Before him, Brian Mulroney, 9 seasons. You want a renewal after 10 seasons? The odds are against it, quite apart from anything else.
I like that.
So this guy says, it's time you go. It's been 9 awful seasons, 8 awful seasons as far as Trudeau's concerned. Man, it's been horrible. This guy's been a terrible, terrible prime minister. And so when you're talking about a narcissist, a guy who's never going to have a whiff of this type of power again. Once he's out, he'll be yesterday's news, and nobody will give a rat's ass what he thinks anymore. I mean, I don't care what he thinks now, but I think this guy is holding on for dear life, and this is just another ploy, this whole thing, and he's clowning himself big time. The more he tries to hang on, using whatever means at his disposal, the worse he looks. Last word to you, Ross.
Yeah, well, like I said, these are complicated issues. I mean, he's playing games and fighting with one of our big trading partners, the largest democracy. He's basically called out, and he's called it out. His government. I don't think he's announced what Jagmeet has said. He hasn't asked for Jagmeet to resign, calling out that he's going to hold the leader of another country to account. I mean, this is just playing with politics. Now, Modi isn't the nicest guy in the world. He's got a lot of people that aren't very enamored with him.
I agree.
I mean, but look, he is the guy running that country. And if they decide to turn off trade with Canada, we're going to lose pharmaceuticals. All of our pharmaceuticals are made over in India. We're going to have shortages of pharmaceuticals. He is putting Canada at danger because of his flippant little tongue and his desire to hold on to power. And he is playing with terrorism on our behalf. And it is not good for us,
You know,
and it's not good for India, and it's not good for the India diaspora that's here.
yeah. By the way, who gains if India pulls the plug on these trade deals with Canada? Well, I think China does. They want to supply. They want more trade, I suspect. And if you get India out of the way, well, I think that it's more money for them. That's my take on it. I think China does have something to gain by fomenting dissent as far as India is concerned in Canada. All right. Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate talking to you today.
Thanks. Everybody be safe out there.
Absolutely. Ross McLean joining us. And let's take a break. Back with more on News Talk Saga 960, the Mark Petronis Show after this.
And that's a wrap on the interview with Mark Petroni. Thanks for that interview, Mark. I always enjoy going on with him. I was especially like the idea that he picked up on how China is likely to benefit from this fight with India as we go on. I have a feeling that this is going to become worse. This war of words, this war of accusations with India, and it's going to cost Canada plenty. It's also going to end up costing the G7 and the G20 plenty, as India is walking more away from the West and more to joining Russia and China. And I personally would love to see much more integration and work with the country of India. They're some of the finest people I've met. Thanks for listening. Check out some other editions of my podcast. I try to give you analysis and rules in each one that help you to decode the language of the media and the propaganda today.